President Trump's plan to use force not to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, but to close it to all shipping, has horrified and mystified America's erstwhile allies.
We are focusing our efforts on opening in full the Strait of Hormuz because of the damage it's doing to economies around the world, including our own economy. And we, the UK, will not be joining the blockade that the President announced.
The ongoing closure of the Strait of Hormuz is greatly damaging, and the restoration of the freedom of navigation is of paramount importance for us.
Before the ceasefire, the US bombed Karg Island, where Iran's oil is processed. President Trump's aim is to block all Iran's oil exports, whatever the cost to the world economy.
It's a move that is sort of strange and difficult to understand, in part because it seems out of step with the ceasefire, or not in the spirit of the ceasefire. A blockade is an act of war, and it's seen as such under international law. And so if the US does try to use significant force to block ships from moving, especially ships related to Iran's oil exports, that is something that I think Iran will retaliate against forcefully.
Some 800 ships are stranded, waiting for the Strait of Hormuz to open. 2 Iranian vessels, the Aurora and New Future, carrying diesel, passed through today, and 2 US warships went through at the weekend. The Americans are expected to enforce the blockade mainly from the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea, east of the strait, where the USS Abraham Lincoln is currently deployed and other warships are positioned. But Iran could hit back at US bases, regional ports and pipelines in the UAE, Saudi Arabia and Iraq. And Iran's allies, the Houthis in Yemen, could harass shipping going through the alternative strait, the Bab al-Mandab. But as ship owners contemplated the escalating cost of insurance and stranded crews wondered when they'd get provisions, today the president doubled down.
Iran is doing absolutely no business, and we're going to keep it that way very easily. Don't forget, their Navy is gone, their Air Force is gone, their anti-aircraft is gone, their radar is gone, and their leaders are gone. That's a lot.
Today, Iranian TV showed what it claimed was a US warship near the strait. It's not clear when these pictures were taken. A Revolutionary Guard spokesman was quoted accusing the Americans of piracy and saying no ports in the region would be safe if the US attempted to block Iranian ports or shipping. That's a threat against America's Gulf allies.
I think the Gulf states are probably blindsided. This is completely inconsistent with what had been their core demand for bringing this conflict to a close, which was to reopen the strait on which their economies so profoundly depend. The response of trying to just double up on basically the blockade that Iran had imposed seems completely antithetical to what the Gulf states had wanted.
The UAE continues to pump out propaganda videos, saying nothing to see here, everything's just fine. President Trump isn't helping promote that version of reality.
Lindsay Hilson there. Well, oil prices snapped back above $100 a barrel in response to President Trump's plans to blockade Iranian ports. And there's been a warning that the Iran war is set to cut living standards in the UK this year. Our economics reporter Neil MacDonald is here. Neil, how have the energy markets responded to all of this?
Well, it sent a fresh jolt of pessimism through the markets, according to one analyst today, rather undercutting the optimism that was around after the announcement of the ceasefire. And if you look at the price of oil over last Friday and then today, you can see that sudden shift in sentiment rather clearly. I mean, the immediate reason is that Iran exports about 1.8 million barrels of oil, and a successful blockade would obviously stop that flowing. Most of it goes to China. I mean, 1 barrel out of every 8 that China imports comes from Iran, and if they can't get it from Iran, obviously they'll go looking for it from another country. You'd expect that to push up prices. All of that said, I mean, $100 is a lot lower than some of the peaks we've seen in recent weeks. That suggests the financial markets, at least, believe that today's escalation doesn't preclude some sort of long-term deal.
But what is the latest on how this will affect people here?
Well, we learned today from the RAC that the average prices of petrol and diesel have now gone up every day for 40 days in a row, and inevitably that's starting to hit people's pockets. Now, the Resolution Foundation was expecting living standards this year to rise by 0.9% for the average working age household. They now think it's going to drop by 0.6% because of everything that's going on. They calculate that as a £480 hit. And those figures don't include the impact yet of food prices, because the foundation says it's too early to make that calculation. But those food prices are likely to have a big impact on households. That will increase the pressure on the Chancellor to tell us how far she can protect people from rising prices. Just today, the German government said it was going to commit £1.4 billion to cutting duties on petrol and diesel.
Thanks very much, Neil MacDonald there. Matt.
Thanks, Jackie. Well, according to Israeli media, Benjamin Netanyahu has warned that the ceasefire between Iran and the US could turn on a dime. While at the same time, Israeli strikes on Lebanon and Hezbollah attacks have also stepped up. Our chief correspondent, Alex Thompson, is in Jerusalem now. Alex.
Well, yes. Well, if you thought that the recent talks between the Americans and the Iranians in Islamabad were, shall we say, inauspicious, just try this one for size. Netanyahu under clear pressure from Trump to get a deal with the Lebanese government to somehow shut down Hezbollah. It's the first time we've seen talks at this level between those two governments since the 1970s. But hang on a minute, it's all about shutting down Hezbollah. Hezbollah won't be at these talks. Of course they won't. They remain pledged to destroy Israel. Hezbollah saying to the somewhat puny forces of the Lebanese government, if you try and shut us down, you're going to get a civil war. And a senior official from them saying tonight, anything that happens from these talks is irrelevant to them. It all leaves Netanyahu grinding out slowly his so-called security zone in southern Lebanon. These pictures today show, you have to say, yet again, Israeli forces hitting a medical installation, several ambulances destroyed. It's reported that at least one person believed to be a passenger in one of those ambulances was killed. That was the entire southern city on the coast in Lebanon. As for Netanyahu himself, well, he donned the fatigues, military fatigues, and went on something of a propaganda jaunt at the weekend into his so-called security zone in southern Lebanon. This is what he said.
The first thing is that they are pushing the enemy away from the border. We're not talking about 5 points, we're talking about a solid, deeper security zone that both prevents the danger of infiltration and pushes back the anti-tank missile threat.
It all leaves the Israeli people supportive of the war aims. They still want to see Hezbollah put into history, and they want to see regime change in Iran. But they know full well, as the whole world does, frankly, by now, that the stated aims, the war aims of Benjamin Netanyahu in these fronts on Iran, as in Lebanon, are a long, long way from being achieved.
Alex in Jerusalem, thank you very much indeed. Well, it's not often that the Pope makes a statement to reporters on his plane to respond to outspoken criticism by the President of the United States, and then the President refuses to apologize. But we live in unprecedented times, to put it mildly. Let's get more now from our US editor, Anushka Astana. Anushka, what's going on?
You know, Matt, you couldn't make this up. If you were to write a novel about how outlandish Trump 2.0 could become, I still think you would hold back from a full-on feud between the president and the Pope. But that is where we are. Now, how did we get here? Pope Leo, the first American-born Pope, has been quite pointed in his criticism of the Iran war, urging the president to look for an off-ramp, saying in an Easter message, let those who have the power to unleash wars choose peace. And then he repeated that sentiment this weekend. Now, we know Donald Trump lashes out when he is angry, and he really lashed out at Pope Leo last night, writing on Truth Social, Pope Leo is weak on crime. I think that's a reference to when the Pope has talked about immigration policy here. Trump said he was terrible on foreign policy, that he should use common sense and not cater to the radical left, and that he shouldn't criticise a president who won a landslide. Well, as you said, this morning, Pope Leo was on a plane heading to a tour of African countries, and he responded. Have a listen.
I do not look at my role as being political or politician. I don't want to get into a debate with him. Too many people are suffering in the world today. Too many innocent people are being killed. And I think someone has to stand up and say, there's a better way to do this.
Now, as you said, Matt, we've also heard from Trump himself on this. When he was asked if he would apologise to Pope Leo, he said no, that Pope Leo is wrong, that millions would die if there was a nuclear Iran, and Pope Leo wouldn't like that. He says he prefers his brother Louis, who he says is a MAGA guy. And it's not the only controversy. Last night, President actually posted on Truth Social a picture which appears to make him look like he is a Jesus-like figure. It's caused some anger, including among some of his own supporters. Well, when he was asked about that, he was unapologetic as well. Take a listen to that.
Only the fake news could come up with that one. So I just heard about it, and I said, how did they come up with that? It's supposed to be me as a doctor making people better, and I do make people better. I make people a lot better.
Trump as a doctor, even his supporters were upset about that image, and that presumably is why he has deleted it.